All right, y'all, welcome back to another episode of Remap Your Mind. It's time to create a life you design. And I am super excited to have the one, the only Dr. Alauna Curry, trauma psychiatrist, with me today. So I had to tell you, we had the most juicy conversation pre-show that I was like, oh my God, we need to press record because, I think Dr. Alana and I have been running in the same circles for some years now. And I love her. I love the work that she does. Y'all know I'm a an unconscious mind geek. That's what I do. And she's like my partner in healing in the central time zone over here, And so I just want to tell you how excited I am. We're talking about trauma hurts and empathy heals. And welcome, welcome, welcome to the show, Dr. Lana. So good to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. And I always love talking to you. So
Yes.
let's get
Get ready.
it.
Get ready. So, well, of course, first, I really want the listeners to know who you are, what you do, and just a little bit of your story and how you came to this place.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Alana, trauma psychiatrist, and I hail from St. Louis, Missouri. I went to Xavier University of Louisiana in New Orleans. Yay. And it's Give Love Xavier time. So I'm repping Xavier hard.
Rep.
Yes. Oh, come on, high five. Class of 2003.
All right. All right.
So I went to Baylor College of Medicine in Houston and stuck around for psychiatry residency. And then when I came out of school, I took a job at the VA and I was a trauma specialist. I worked with veterans of PTSD, anxiety, depression, substance use disorders, other impulse control and behavioral addictions. And a lot of that was about just trying to gain understanding, but also helping them as much as they were helping me. Because in the process of caring for them, I was actually made the psychiatrist for a inpatient program called Rover, Returning OEF, OIF, OND Veterans Environment of Recovery. So Iraq, Afghanistan war veterans, and then also thanks to Congress and short staffing, I had to do the women's program too, the Wiser program. And
Wow.
those programs were unique because they would come into the hospital and do a year's worth of evidence-based treatment in 1 month. And as the psychiatrist, I got to basically sit in this program and learned about a lot of the things that they were learning, like anger management and um, cognitive processing therapy, prolonged exposure therapy. Occupational therapy, recreational therapy, like, is really trying to get into so many things. And I had to learn DBT or dialectical behavioral therapy in order to teach it to the veterans. Because again, thank you, Congress, for short staffing us. Anyway,
Right, right, right,
so
right.
in the process of doing those things and learning and being in that role, it made me start to recognize, like, first of all, none of us get a good education about emotions. And it's like,
Hmm.
this is some really basic stuff that I was learning. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. How am I a psychiatrist? Did
Hmm.
all this school, did pretty good
Right,
at it,
right,
right?
right,
We're
right.
psychiatrists. I know I'm good. I had enough information to know that, like, I'm operating in the top of my field.
Yeah.
Yet there are these things that are not connected to the biology, right? Because
Mhm.
as a psychiatrist, I had to understand the brain mechanisms of some of the behaviors and the thought processes and patterns that I was seeing in the veterans. And
Mhm.
so it started to stand out to me that we as a species, as a human species, are running on our primitive brain systems. They're
Mm.
dominating the way we think, the way that we respond, the way we interpret each other, and therefore they're dominating the world that we create for ourselves. And
Yes.
you can look at the news
You
and
can look
see
at
the
the world and
evidence,
see it.
the
Absolutely.
evidence of
Absolutely.
this
Every day.
thing. Yeah,
Yes.
basically. And that was a really transformative process for me because it caused me to even, really shift the way that I thought about how to deliver trauma care. because it got to the point where, well, number one, I retired because my health gave out on me. But number two, I realized that the best way that I can help people is by teaching them about their brain and how it processes information. And trauma creates a predictable pattern of changes in these brain systems. And if you understand what's happening there, then I can also give you the tools and the skills to be able to self-regulate. And so that's when I was like, okay, I gotta retire Dr. Curry. She's writing prescriptions in there, and
Yeah.
she can't do that anymore. But what I can do is Dr. Lana can teach and become a trauma psychiatrist. And I coined that term because it was shocking to me to realize that every single person has experienced psychological trauma. You live long
Mhm.
enough in this world, you're going to experience something that causes you to change the way you think about yourself, other
Yes.
people, and the world, and something painful, something damaging, and something that restructures how you function so that you can function. And that's not, just going to war, combat, or being a
Mhm.
victim of a crime or an assault or anything like
Mhm.
that. It's also being invalidated by the environment around you, telling you that your experience is not real, that you
Mhm.
should think or feel something other than what your authentic self thinks and feels.
Mhm.
It happens when people, 99% of the psychological traumas that happen are happening because of words and the way people say them
Mhm.
and throw them and how we deliver those things. And people
Yes.
don't recognize that saying something is actually an action. So it
Mhm.
really shifted my perspective to focusing on being able to explain to people just how powerful every single one of us are to create our own reality and what you can do about that.
I
So
love
that's
it.
me.
I love it. There's so many things in what you said. I'm like, ooh, where to begin? Where
Yeah,
to begin?
yeah.
Um, one of the things you said that just really stuck with me is like every single person has experienced trauma. And
Mhm.
so as we were kind of discussing beforehand, like that's the baseline from which
Yeah.
everyone is operating. And it's interesting because many people, and I'll tell you myself, interesting, I don't share this a lot, but I grew up in a home of domestic abuse, of domestic violence.
Mhm.
And so and for many, many years. And I watched as a child, my mom be abused, and then my thought process as an adult, as an early adult, was that, oh, my mom experienced this, right? So it never occurred to me that I
We're
experienced it.
experiencing it with her. Yeah.
Glass breaking and, gunshots and bloody black eyes and bloody lips and blood on the floor. And it never occurred to me that that was traumatic for me because I wasn't the one that was actually physically getting assaulted.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until a friend of mine who was a PhD psychologist here in the Atlanta area. I don't know. I must have. We were having a conversation. I must have said something, and she said, "Are you a trauma survivor?" And I
Mhm.
said, "No, no, I'm not a trauma survivor. I haven't been had any major trauma." Now my mom, on the other hand, and then I tell the story, and she was like, "Girl."
Yeah. That was
It was
traumatic.
the first
It
time that
is.
yes, then I started really peeling back the layers and identifying traumas even before that. That
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, I guess that was. And so people don't often recognize and often dismiss their own traumas.
Mhm.
Especially the people like, oh well, my parents are still together and I had a happy life growing up, and so no, I don't have any trauma. But then
Yeah.
there's that thing that your unconscious mind has suppressed or repressed,
Yeah.
that
And
you've
it's still a
dismissed.
yeah, it's programming. So
Hmm.
um I
Yeah.
what the most shocking part to me, and really I'll tell you a little bit about the background of what really triggered me to start doing this deep dive was when Michael Brown Jr. was killed in Ferguson, Missouri. I'm from
Hmm.
St. Louis. That resonated incredibly with me in part because I was a bit of a troubled kid when I was growing up. Thank God we don't look like what we've
No.
been through or what we didn't put other people through, but I definitely have my moments.
Yeah.
And but I was also married to a police officer at the time named Michael. So like the whole thing, my son's name is Michael, my
Wow.
father-in-law's name is Michael. I mean, it was just like, and
Wow. Yeah.
it blew my mind, and I couldn't stop looking at it. And what I started to recognize was that I'm hearing the same patterns of thought processes coming out of my television from the TV commentators. I'm
Mm-hmm.
hearing trauma patterns from my friends and my family. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, suddenly my mind is starting to diagnose everybody with trauma. And I'm like, well,
Mm-hmm.
either I'm crazy or everybody traumatized.
Right.
And of course, in the field, that's not how we conceptualize things. We conceptualize in terms of diagnoses
Yeah.
and these other packets and clusters of symptoms. But we have a huge blind spot for psychological trauma in
Mm-hmm.
this country and in this world, in part
Mm-hmm.
because the dominant psychology that put this thing together that we're still operating under was creating a lot of psychological trauma,
Yes.
in and of itself.
Absolutely.
So we have a system that there's this huge blind spot for trauma,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm like, okay, well, if I'm seeing it, it took me a minute to be like, okay, if everybody's traumatized, then you need to look at you. And when I
Mm-hmm.
started looking at my life and being like, oh, 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 dang, parents went through divorce,
Mm-hmm.
custody battles,
Mm-hmm.
acting, and then it started to connect to me like even some of my behaviors and the acting out things that I did when I was young were coming from a place of being traumatized,
Mm-hmm.
psychological pain, emotions and other things that I was not aware of and that was not able to even recognize why and how I got into certain situations in my life.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, well, hell, if I didn't know about it, and I'm a dang old trauma psychiatrist, like nobody's getting has a good
Yeah.
chance of being able to control their amygdala and their reticular activating system and their brain reward system. If you don't know you have it, if
Yeah.
you think that if you're addicted to sugar and you can't figure out why you gaining all this weight and you can't figure out why you can't stop eating these unhealthy foods when you're
Mm-hmm.
addicted to salt and addicted to animal fats and other things like that, which is societally normalized, then you're going to have these consequences. You're going to, oh, that's the devil putting that ice cream in my cart every night. No, it's not the devil. It's your brain reward system
Right. Right.
making, pushing your body to do these things and have these invisible urges and surges and other things that
Mm-hmm.
actively affect every decision you make.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't know that you have those systems because it wasn't part of your education. When you learn elbow and ear, you should also learn amygdala.
Exactly.
You
That's
know,
right. That's right. Get it. Get the amygdala. Get the amygdala picture out. That's right.
they're right there. That puppy right there, that
Ah,
amygdala,
yes.
because yeah, think about it. It doesn't create your emotions based on reality. It creates them based on what you've been taught to tell yourself about whatever it is that you're experiencing. It creates it based on your interpretation
Mm-hmm.
of what's going on at any given moment. And then it will give you the directly proportional sensation that
Mm-hmm.
goes with what you are saying to yourself about the scenario. And it's nobody else makes your emotions. He's not making you mad.
Mm-hmm.
She's not the one making you happy. It's your amygdala. And
Yeah.
it's how you're thinking that causes your amygdala to generate that response. And that
Mm-hmm.
it was such simple but profound
Right.
uh, thought process that made me change the way I think about everybody. Because
Yes.
I'm like, I see a bunch of animal human spirits
Mm-hmm.
out here running around, just
Mm-hmm.
as primitive,
Mm-hmm.
trying to evolve, but stuck in the biology that's so powerful that we believe that our version is the only version that matters. Our version is the only version that's real. And the
Right.
reality is that everybody's version is just as real to them
Yeah.
as the other person's. And the only way you get there is through empathy.
That's right.
Is through forcing yourself to step back and put your aversion to the side and
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, this is the only part of this that I can see. And the only way I can get to the other side of this is actually hear this other person out. But that means
Yeah.
I gotta control this,
Yes.
this right here.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's hard to control.
It is. It is. I mean, it takes practice, right? And one of the things I think that's so on point that you said is when you say, you start looking at yourself. And I think that that's the thing that sometimes people avoid. Like
Mhm.
maybe it's afraid to look at oneself. Maybe it's still, abdicating responsibility. But the only way to begin to heal is to actually recognize it, admit it. They say in 12-step programs, acceptance is the key to my serenity day. Acceptance is the first step to healing. And so we have to begin to recognize it first, accept that it's there. Like everybody's traumatized, right? Everybody's traumatized. So now you gotta look at, well, okay, where is that place in me? How has that impacted? And really start to look and do that deep work, which is, why I love what you do, why I teach what I teach, and why I love what you teach as well, is
Yeah.
to really look at those patterns. And I love how you break down, look at this is what's so great. This is like brain science. There's this term in our community that some people use called woo woo. I don't even know who made that up. I don't even know what woo woo's supposed to be, right? But this is right. Woo. I don't know. That's it? I don't know. But I think that people have to understand that this is brain science. This is how your brain works. And it's important for people to begin to learn about their own brains, learn about the various like you said, the amygdala, reticular activating system, the brain reward system, like all of these things that you teach about step by step. If you can learn about them, then you can begin to be at the source of your
Yeah.
thoughts, actions, speaking, emotion, and then therefore you're at the source of the results in your life, relationships, finances, business, all of that, right?
All that,
Career,
all
the
that.
whole bit. And
Yeah.
it gives a space of freedom of expression. And I also think that we also in the process of that learning and growing, because some of us are some high performing perfectionist professionals. We need to also be compassionate with ourselves as we do this work and
Mhm.
remember that we're human.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The best thing that happened to me in this process was me recognizing that number one, the only person and the only thing I have control over is me.
Hmm.
Humans are built with a gigantic blind spot for ourselves. We see what everybody else is doing, and we can tell everybody else what's wrong with you and what you need to fix and how you need to fix
Right.
it.
Hmm.
But that's a different thing than carrying it out and walking it out in your own body,
That's
walking
right.
it out in your own mind. And so the skills that I learned to try to help other people have helped me the most
Yeah.
because it has given me so much peace to know that I have control over how I feel about something, that
Hmm.
I can heal from something without needing another person to apologize or even recognize what they did. I
Hmm.
can recognize what it did to me, and I can go in there and, oh, okay, wait a minute, I need to sweep this out. And when I'm finding myself in a negative space, I know, like, okay, that's my primitive brain. I'm looking at this in a shitty way, subjective, harsh,
Hmm.
intense, terrorizing to yourself.
Hmm.
My thought process is creating whatever this negative feeling is inside of me that I'm now aware of.
Hmm.
Now I got to use this prefrontal. It's really only 7 systems that you need to know.
Yeah.
And which is really was shocking to me as I was coming through this process and being like, damn, it's only 7 parts of our brain that we really need to know. I mean, I'm simplifying it, but those 7 parts have such a big impact on what we're seeing in people's lives. Like we
Yeah.
just had the tragic shooting in Atlanta, and we
Hmm.
talk about anti-Asian hate. And
Hmm.
really, what hate boils down to is unprocessed emotions.
Hmm.
It sounds like the young man had a sex addiction from his standpoint, but your biology and what you get introduced to and what you're exposed to and the inability to control it, when the world is saying to you that the other people cause you to feel sexually aroused. Other people are the reason that you feel a certain way.
Mm.
Then you are going to blame them, and then you're going to go take it out on those other people when you feel like you have lost all ability to regulate yourself and you feel
Mm.
hopeless like that.
Mhm.
And that is a result, a pure result of lack of education about how our emotions and our thought processes and our brain actually works.
Yeah.
So every person needs to. I use the acronym AIM up.
Mhm.
AIM up. Awareness of your identity, right? Like
Mhm.
have the awareness that your brain is that powerful that when you think something, it creates invisible mechanisms start going off. And
Mhm.
that thought will create something inside of you, and then
Mhm.
it will create something outside of you because you'll
Mhm.
say it, you'll speak on it, or
Right.
maybe you won't say something that needs to be said. But either
Mhm.
way, your physical body is then going to act it out and manifest it in this world. So your thoughts have real power. Your emotions are invisible, but they're
Mhm.
always present.
Yes.
Everyone has them.
Yes.
Men have them, women have them,
Right.
children have them,
That's right.
no matter what, there's only one human race that was proven by the results of the Human Genome Project that came out in 2003 that biologically our DNA is 99.9% the same. We have 6 billion pieces of DNA in there, and
Mhm.
only 0.1% of them make the difference between me, you, and anybody else. So there's
Mm.
no such thing as mixed race. There's no such thing as multiple races. There's one
Mhm.
freaking race with a
Mhm.
bunch of ethnicities that, as we spread out from Africa and went all across the world, that
Mhm.
changed and adapted on the outside in response to the environment because we're always evolving. But
Mhm.
now we are in a space where if we don't evolve in the way that we think about ourselves and aim up, right, be
Mhm.
aware of our identity,
Mhm.
be informed about our biology,
Mhm.
you you're too powerful to just be walking around just buttons just flying off the hook,
That's
folks
right.
going off on each other. Like your
Right.
words
Right. Right.
are
Right.
so if you
Exactly.
don't know what your body and your biology is doing, you are at
Mhm.
the absolute mercy of it because it's the default.
Right.
And then the M is motivated to use skills. There are
Mm.
skills that you can use to calm yourself, to
Yeah.
recognize your when your biology is ramping up, like, oh,
Right.
that's not them, not the words you want. I mean, like this, like, Lord, I don't want my amygdala speaking for me, okay?
Oh Lord.
But when you become motivated to use skills, it moves you into a different space because you start to
Mhm.
recognize, like, okay, wait a minute, even though there's a lot of invisible stuff out here like
Right.
bacteria and viruses, there's also thoughts and emotions and spirit,
Yes.
and I need to have awareness of
Mhm.
myself and how I affect that other person. So that's the
Yeah.
up. The up is upgrade the
Mhm.
way that you think about yourself and anybody else.
That's
We
right.
are just human, but we're not just human. This
Mhm.
animal part of us is biology that creates psychology. And then that psychology is powerfully creative in the world, right?
Mm.
That's that spirit part of us that we neglect. Like we think about the physical part first, but the
Mhm.
spirit part is bigger and more powerful and enduring than this
Mhm.
physical body, but we give
Mm.
very little attention
That's right.
and conscious awareness to the
Right.
fact that anatomically we are all powerful beings,
That's right.
superheroes.
Mhm.
Nothing that happens to you changes your anatomy. So
Mhm.
all of that stuff that we tell ourselves about, because this happened, because I was assaulted. Some people can't even say the word rape,
Right.
because it's so much causes so much emotions and things in them. But that's this biology. And
Mm.
what we tell ourselves about the things that we've been through
Mhm.
have real active influence over how we interpret our now.
Yes.
And most people, without this information, your biology is just going to be on thinking about the past, trying to, rehash something that you can't do anything about,
Right.
or worrying about a future
Right.
that you see as incredibly scary or painful or
Right.
whatever, trying to prevent those future traumas.
Based on the past, by the way. Based on the past, right? Creating a future based on the past.
And that in itself means that when you got 7 billion plus human creators operating on primitive mode, you gonna make hell. And it did what it looked like hell to me when I look out there. I'm like, you can't go much anywhere without wanting to bring your pistol because
right.
it's popping off so bad. But a million people having guns is still not gonna stop the only thing that will stop the chaos is if every single person took some time to go within and self-study and understand, like, if I'm feeling this psychologically distressed, or if I'm having all this anger and this pain and this hate and this jealousy or this embarrassment, this disgust and all this other stuff, I need to do some self-work because I'm the only person that has control over that. How I'm thinking and how I've been taught to think. We talked about this before we started. We are in a society that is inherently psychologically unhealthy.
Right.
Because we have so many primitive concepts and things that have been really disproven that are still the bedrock of how we think about how to do things.
Yes.
So none of us got a absolutely healthy environment to grow up in. So we have to actually create that from scratch and be able to say, what does a healthy Alauna look like? What does a healthy Maiysha look like? What does a healthy world look like? What are healthy words to water my children with? And what are healthier ways to respond to my parents and my friends and family and colleagues? And in doing that and asking those questions and, putting your body in neutral and being able to recognize that, ooh, my amygdala is kicking right now. I don't think I need to say that right now. I need to go do some mindfulness skills or rub some cold water on my face or do something. Use something to, a dear man. I love dear man. That's my favorite skill. Because it forces the prefrontal cortex to come on. Right. And the primitive stuff is loud. It's like the roar of a lion. But that the better part of your brain is very quiet. It doesn't work unless you take the time to step back and actually think with it. Right. And engage it intentionally. And then suddenly new words come up, new ways of doing things, better ways of conducting oneself to get to what you want to create, which all of us are sick of this. I don't know nobody who's out here like, yeah, this is good. You got climate change. There's nowhere you can go on this planet that you're not going to be affected by something, whether it's the immigration situation or the coronavirus and all that. We are connected. We are connected. We are one race, one very powerful species that is in a space where we can no longer deny that what happens to one of us is going to ultimately affect all of us. So we need to make decisions with the whole in mind, because no other pathway is going to get us where we really need to be, other than I love you, you love me. I got to find that love somewhere in here. And I know that we're programmed in dysfunctional love, but we have the ability to make ourselves better. And that's all it's doing the psychological push-ups. That's what I tell people. Yeah. Psychological push-ups. Like every day I'll be in here like, ooh, no,
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's so powerful, everything that you said. And I think that, we just need to reach a tipping point in our society and our culture and our nation and our world where people really get that, where people really get that there's one race. Yeah. And, that's a powerful statistic that, or study that found that only 0.1%. Yeah. 0.1%
difference
of the DNA is different.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, honestly, it's the first time I've ever heard that number,
Mm.
and it just makes me even rethink
Mhm.
some things, right?
Yeah.
So I love that, and there's a whole other conversation to be had, because when we talk about everyone's baseline being at trauma, the first thing I think about is the trauma that we inherit, the trauma that's passed down to us.
Mhm.
So, people who know me know that I'm good at leaving cliffhangers. So I'm just gonna say already, before we even begin to wrap it up, this is part one of
Mhm.
part two,
Yeah.
because I do believe there is something to be said about, if we all have trauma,
Mhm.
then it only makes sense that that trauma is coming from somewhere. You
Mhm.
know, we're not born babies with trauma. It
Mhm.
has to be passed down from
Mhm.
generation to generation, which begs the question then, what's the pathway to breaking the cycle? And I'm speaking as a parent,
Mhm.
raising a young black boy, right?
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
is and in community where I'm a source of teaching, I'm a source of transformation, alongside of many others. Like, what is the key to that? And
Yeah.
so,
I got the
cliffhanger,
answer.
I
I'll
know
tell
you
you.
do. I know
It's,
you do.
it's work, but we can do it.
Yes, oh yes. So, I do just want to, this is, I could talk to you all day. Those who are listening, before the call, I was having the conversation like, why can't she be down the street from me so I can go and just hang out and sip some tea with my girl? Because this is the stuff that healing, that transformation is made of,
Mhm.
really. And each one of us has to begin to do this work, including those who are healers in this world, those who proclaim themselves to be inside of the activism world, the anti-racism world, the healing, from physical healing to mental and emotional healing, to all of that. The police officers, how much trauma that they experience, got to do that work, because why are they pulling the trigger so quickly? Well, trauma, you know the amygdala, right? I mean, what how we are continuing to produce similar results over and over, in Einstein's insanity, producing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Reticular activating system, we're not putting new things into our future, right? Because of all of the stuff that we haven't cleaned out of the closet of our
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
So I just thank and appreciate you for starting the conversation, because we're going to continue the conversation. And I want you to talk a little bit about what you do in terms of what are you, what are the programs that you have? How do you help people? How can they follow you? How can they get in touch with you? We're going to also have all this in the show notes as well.
Okay. So they can follow me on any of the social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Most of my stuff is going to be on Facebook though, and LinkedIn as well under Dr. Alauna, DrAlauna. And they can also get more information about me on my website, dralana.com. And I also have a membership based platform where you can come and learn in my online academy, and
Mhm.
that's called Dr. Alauna Trauma Recovery Institute. That's
Mm.
DA-TRI.org. And so for only $33 a month, you have videos of me explaining these brain systems, explaining psychological trauma, as well as a once a month skills coaching group where we would talk about them in detail and how you apply these skills to your real life challenges. So That's where you can find me. That's the only way people can work with me. I do
Yeah,
not see any patients individually anymore.
yeah.
I am retired.
Retire, as am I. I tell you what, I'm gonna be looking at your website because I
Yes.
mean, I just, I feel like no matter how much work you do, there's always more to be done. There's always layers to peel back. And I always tell the people that I have coached around business and entrepreneurship, like you can't coach yourself. Right? You cannot
Yeah.
coach yourself.
No.
You can
Yeah.
do work with yourself, but
Yeah.
because of that blind spot, we need, you know, communities, mentors,
Yeah.
people in our lives to help bring that to the forefront. And so, I've meditated, I've sort of thought about as we've conversed everything, and even before we've started the actual recording, everything that you said, and I was just waiting for you to say the website because
Let's go. Let's go. Let's get it.
yeah, I want to be special. I want to be a part of
Yes. Come
the
on. Come learn
tribe.
about this rain. It's amazing. You'll be
Yes,
amazed. You'll be
because I
amazed.
need to be good for the people that I train and teach
Yeah.
and serve, So I appreciate you for all of that. So we will have all of these things in the show notes, whether you're listening via audio or whether you're watching the video, you will see the show notes. It will have all of the links and the ways that you can reach out to Dr. Alauna. Thank you so much for being with us. I so appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yes. And listeners, I always like to thank the listeners because without the listeners, there is no podcast. If you're liking what you're hearing, please share it because this is not just information. This is transformation. And this is something that we want to get out into the world so we can look at this world so we can really start making a difference one by one. So share it if you like it. If you don't like it, share it anyway, because somebody else probably will.
Somebody
And
needed it.
that's right. That's right. And if you like it, leave a comment or a little review so the people listening behind you can know that this can make a difference in their lives. All right. So check out Dr. Alauna at dralana.com, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And then say the other website again. Uh-huh.
DA-TRI.org. The Try. Dr.
The
Alauna
Try.
Trauma Recovery Institute. The Try.
The Try.
No, we
DA-TRI.
trying. We just,
No,
I'm trying. I'm
the
trying to get
try,
better.
the try. Don't try to do that work. Yes, .org. So we will see you guys on the next episode. Stay safe out there. Have a wonderful rest of the day and a wonderful rest of the week. Namaste.